perfect. Morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody on this Tree of Life session. Hope you've all had a great week. We've had a very packed week here. So we're going to start off with shop news first. So we had a customer come in. This is the second time within 2 weeks. That's good news because the first time the tea that this particular customer had, while she tried to like it very hard, and this was a cup of tea, it was a cup of yellow tea, she just couldn't quite rock the flavor profile. And so I knew that, but she said, no, I'll be back. It's not an issue. So she came back yesterday morning and I said, well, I know you didn't quite appreciate or like that. And she said, no, that's not the issue. I just didn't understand it. And she said, it left my tongue with all these feelings. And I said, stop right there. This means you actually did rock it. You're not used to drinking this type of tea. And I said, was your tongue dried out? She says, yes, very dried out. And so many times when people are coming to source teas, loose leaf teas for the first time, they don't know what they should be really feeling or expecting. And sometimes as you're introducing your friends to loose leaf tea, you need to help them understand. And that's why when we go through the quality arena and talk about mouthfeel and aftertaste and all of those variety of items, it's important for you to do that as well when you're introducing people to loose leaf tea. All right, let's go ahead and walk down the Tree of Life. So where does the Tree of Life come from? It comes from Anhui Province, and it's a small area not so far away from the Yellow Mountains. It's Huashan Mountain. And I ask you this, do you think that if you go on to Alibaba or Taobao or the American internet, which has everything and tells the truth about everything, that you will find this particular tea? The answer would be no. Why is that? Why isn't this sold or advertised anywhere? It's because what it's called is a small varietal, and it comes from one small area and not that much is produced. And so that's what we brought back. And by the way, not only do you not find it on the internet, you don't even find it on our website. One of the reasons for that is we didn't bring that much back. And the second reason, of course, and you know that these reasons all flow from one source all the time. The understudy is lazy, just hasn't gotten it up on the website yet. So Tree of Life is this wonderful green tea that we've gotten this year. And we want to go through that fairly quickly right now. I'm going to have the tea master come and demonstrate to you and then brew with you. And then we'll have a rich discussion about this particular tea because it is different than our other green teas. So it is my great pleasure to bring the tea master up front and have her brew, demonstrate and then brew with you.
Hi, good morning. 早上好, everybody. Yeah, we do green tea, Tree of Life. Yeah, so I like this green tea. So this same thing, this is my, the tea section, So yeah, everybody prefer, it's simple, easy. And then this I used to all the time, This is my style, I display steam, the full, the water. So after transfer, and then this looking at sweetener. Okay, we do, yeah.
So as usual, her setup is 2 glass cups, 16 ounces, and then she has a transfer cup. So she's going to draw water first 200-degree water because she's going to first rinse the glasses and heat them up. The glasses were already clean, but you still go through this process to make sure there are no soap spots, nothing on there that might affect the aroma or the flavor. That's very important. She washes off the strainer as well because sometimes things stick to the strainer, and it's really important to have all of that stuff removed. So this one is brewed at a lower temperature, 170 degrees. This is very important. Remembering, of course, that if you brew things at too high a temperature, what ends up happening is you flatten the flavor. Sometimes if there's sweetness or hints of flavors, you can end up flattening them so much that they're undetectable. So the first thing Sophie is doing is aerating the water, dissipating the steam. And there's no hurry to do this, because it's better to have the right temperature than it is to be in a rush to pull this together. And she feels the cup because Sophie's done this so many times. She knows what 170 feels like. Okay, she's gonna pull out her baggie. So it's 6 grams, 170 degrees, and the first steeping is 2 minutes. The second steeping is 1 minute. So you get 2 good steepings out of each 6 grams. So she puts the leaves in the heated cup. So you're going to ask me in a minute, is this a spring pick? And the answer is yes, it is a spring pick. And what is the pick? It's a bud and 2 leaves. Now, what type of bud am I talking about? I'm talking about a leaf bud. So she puts it in the cup. She's going to shake it up. What's the purpose of this? This is to heat the leaves. So once you apply heat to tea leaves, you have the ability to start to get a sense of what the flavor might end up being. You certainly get a preliminary aroma. She adds the water on the side, and then she sets the timer for 2 minutes and starts it. Great. All right. So by the way, a shout out for all the people who are in different locations. I think we have a viewer from France. I know we have a viewer from Canada. I think we have a viewer from Japan. So we got a lot of far-flung places this morning. Happy to have everybody on board. So this small varietal we found many years ago, but because we were focused on getting more of the big name teas and we just couldn't sync right with this particular farmer. It took us a number of years to sync right and actually get this in the shop. That's what happens overall when you're getting small varietals. Doesn't matter from what part of the country you're getting them. You have to be there at the time or actually focus with the farmer at the time that they harvest them. So it's a bud and a leaf, usual process for green tea. You pick, you bring into the farm. This is done at the farm. You wither briefly. You don't wither a whole lot with this, usually about 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes up to 2 hours, and then you fry. Farmer fries this. Temperatures around 300 to 400 degrees. The farmer does the frying in the Yellow Mountain style. And that is, they actually fry at a hotter temperature and then fry it relatively quicker than, say, if you were in Zhejiang province. All right, so the timer's gone off. Tea master is going to separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Those leaves are beautiful. They mostly hung up at the top. Deliberately separating the leaves from the water. So when you brew this, it should look like this. So let's carefully see what this looks like. Pretty transparent, right? And oh, there looks like there's some white things floating around in here. Wow, that's good. Those are trichomes. Reminding ourselves that trichomes are hairs on the leaves, and these hairs are full of polyphenols. These are the things that the voracious insects hate. They hate polyphenols. It tastes bitter to them, tastes unpleasant to them. So this is a natural mechanism of the plant to defend itself against pests and bugs. So first thing we do is we look at these leaves and we smell. So right away, when you smell this, you're going to get some impressions, and you're going to get some strong impressions, because this is not subtle. It's very direct. But you do need to do it a couple times to make sure you're really appreciating that directness. Now, this is 170-degree water, right? So that means we can take a 170-degree sip. That's a slightly larger sip, significantly larger sip than a 200-degree inhalation. And we're going to enter the quality arena when we take this sip. So we're going to evaluate what's happening in terms of mouthfeel. That's the first thing. What's happening in terms of aftertaste? What about sides of the mouth? And then energetics. Energetics, of course, being the term that we use to describe how you feel after drinking the tea or when you're drinking the tea. It's not sometimes instantaneous, sometimes it is. So I'm going to take a sip of this and I'm going to see whether this is any good. We're not in a hurry when we do this. We're really trying to determine that feel on the tongue, the feel in the mouth. I'm gaining a sense of that, gaining a sense of an aftertaste with this. Okay, I'm going to do this again. Okay, I think that I have a preliminary understanding of this tea. It's your turn to brew together with the tea master, and then for you to tell me what you're going to end up with here. So remember, you're going to heat up both the cups. Hopefully you've set aside water at 170 degrees, but if you haven't, you're doing that right now. And when you heat the cups, you can use any temperature of water from 170 to 212, up to you. We tend to use hotter when we warm up the cups, but if you say, hey, all I have is 170, that's fine. Make sure you rinse the strainer. And now Xiaobei is going to draw the water that she's going to use for this. Remember, she's going to dissipate the heat because, dissipate the steam because she's drawing water from this particular water tower that's 175 degrees. So the first thing she's going to do is to dissipate the steam, aerate the water, and reduce the heat down to 170. It actually happens fairly quickly when you use this method. We've actually done some timings of it and are surprised at how quickly when you do this, it loses the temperature or reduces the temperature. So don't worry if you got a 170 degree temperature kettle and you say, well, I don't want to go through all this dissipation stuff. That's fine. You don't have to. And remembering that all these details, they do matter, but is one missed detail going to wreck your tea? The answer is no. So long as it isn't a grammage mistake and so long as it isn't a temperature mistake, especially a too high temperature mistake. So you're going to open bag number 1, labeled Tree of Life, and you're going to put those leaves in the heated cup. Shake the leaves. Smell. And then pour the water on the side. Make sure you set your timer for 2 minutes. And put water in the recipient cup to heat it up. Okay. So I was telling you that they pan fry this. They do a slight rolling action afterwards and they bake it. So it sounds really simple. It sounds really easy. They sort through, obviously, before they pack it, make sure there's nothing extraneous in it. And that is, in totality, the process. Sounds easy. It's hard to execute, remembering, of course, that the farmers are making judgments from experience. And they're making judgments from what they're smelling all along the way. And that adds complication. And it adds complication because you don't have, it's not like in India where they have big plantations, they run machines, machine pick, everything's controlled temperature-wise. That's not the way it's done here. Here, it's done through a craft process, and this, again, is such a small crop. Very few people really have a chance to have this. Now, remember in the pictures I sent you, there's pictures of a village there, and it's a tourist place now because they have buildings from the Ming Dynasty and buildings preserved from the Qing Dynasty. But sometimes they call this a tunxi, that's the name of the village, small varietal. But that's the furthest they go, and it isn't really grown in tunxi, it's grown near tunxi. All right, timer is finished. You're going to deliberately separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Not in a hurry, just making sure that you do it carefully and thoroughly. And you're going to look again at the color of this thing. You're going to see the trichomes in it, and you're going to start with an evaluation of the tea leaves. And remember, though this is done at 170 degrees, you also want to make sure that you're careful when you stick your nose in. You don't want to stick it so far in that you potentially scald your nasal passage. Okay, so I've established in my mind what I think that is in terms of aroma. And now we go through the quality arena here. And while you're thinking about what you're doing, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about compounds in tea. And we haven't spent a lot of time, we've done a lot of hit and miss on this. And today we're going to start to pull this together a little bit more carefully in terms of the compounds. So by weight, green tea has between 20 and 35% polyphenols in it. It also has somewhere between 2 to 4% methyl xanthines. Now, you notice I used a large word, which means what I just said is true. But I have to explain that large word. Methyl xanthines are alkaloids. That's still a large word. Let's get it down to something you're used to hearing. Caffeine. Caffeine is an alkaloid. Theophylline is an alkaloid. And theobromine is an bromine is an alkaloid. And these are all in tea to a lesser or smaller degree. So caffeine and theophylline are to a greater degree. Theobromine is to a lesser degree. You get much more theobromine in chocolate than you do in tea. All right. In addition to that, and Alvin, I know you asked me a question ages ago, probably 5 or 6 months ago, and finally I'm really, really clear on the answer. Green tea has vitamin K in it, has vitamin E in it. Green tea specifically also has some B vitamins and vitamin C. In addition, there are amino acids, and the amino acids in tea, the one that accounts for 50% of those amino acids is called L-theanine. And we've talked about L-theanine. It's a plant protein, and it reduces tension in the body and brings you to mental clarity. Somebody have some comments yet? Okay. So those are some of the main components. Now, obviously, when you talk about moisture in the leaf, there's between 70 to 75% moisture in the leaf as well. And so when they wither, one of the first things they're trying to do is reduce that moisture by about 30%, somewhere between 20 and 30%, to make the leaf pliable. The reason that there's a range and it's not so specific is the farmer knows what they want at the back end. So what do I mean by back end here? What I mean is after they're done frying and they actually are going to roll it or shape it, they need to have it at a certain pliability. And so that's related to how much they wither up front. And it's also related to the frying of the tea itself.
Comments on the tea study. We have lovely aroma. The tree of life suggests a dewy meadow.
Okay, so this commentator starts off, lovely aroma suggests a dewy meadow. There's a lot of reasons I like the dewy meadow description, But let's hear some more of your comments because I want to get back to this dewy meadow, but I don't want to cut off the other comments because I think you're going to come into the exact reason I like this comment so much. Yes.
Yeah, warm leaves have a very sweet smell.
Warm leaves have a very sweet smell. Absolutely on the money with that.
And the dry leaves smell more like hay or grass.
The dry leaves are more like being out there in the meadow. They smell like hay or grass.
And we're getting another sweet brininess for the leaves.
Love this one. Sweet brininess. So the brininess suggests an umami-ness to it. And certain catechins are responsible for that umami flavor.
Yeah, we're getting more buttery, grassy in the taste.
Buttery, grassy. Okay, I love the buttery portion of this. The buttery portion of this really relates to how this ends up feeling in your mouth. This is, you've used buttery, perfect, and no problem with that at all. It suggests a smoothness to it, an ease of drinking this.
And the commentator also says drying in the aftertaste.
Drying in the aftertaste. What's interesting about this particular tea is you're going to feel that dryness in the aftertaste for some period of time. Even after you finish the cup, you'll be surprised. Oh my gosh, my tongue has a lot of dryness still there.
Another commentator says very smooth on the tongue. For me, this tea begs to be gulped, not sipped.
Okay, now let's go back to dewy meadow. Smooth on the tongue is this commentator's comment, and the further portion of the comment is almost the sensibility of wanting to gulp it because it's that smooth, that easy, and though nobody's used the word juicy yet, it also has a juiciness. And if you take those and combine it with that dewy meadow, that's a perfect description of what's going on with this tea.
We do actually have one person who mentioned the liquor is very juicy and tastes of sweet press.
Ah, that's great. A commentator did mention it, juicy, has a taste of a sweet cress. I like these comments a lot because what it's suggesting, there are not that many green teas where the sweetness kind of comes up. It bubbles up surprisingly in this. Now, this is not the sweetness of green javelin. Those of you who've had green javelin, that sweetness grabs your attention right away. There's no waiting on that sweetness, and that sweetness has a little bit of almost a hint of fruitiness. This one does not. This one is the sweetness is almost an afterthought as you're going through the smoothness, the juiciness, the meadow, the dewy meadow. All of those things come first, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's a little sweetness to this as well.
A couple of the questions that have popped up that I needed to ask around the region. What is it? It seems to be mismatched from what was mentioned in the email and with the spelling of it.
Hopefully I didn't mismatch it, but you know, this is the understudy, so all sorts of things like that can happen. So it's from Anhui province. So that's the most important thing. You should, and Anhui is A-N-H-U-I, and it's not very far away from Huoshan, Huoshan, but it's known as a Tunxi small varietal, Tunxi small varietal, but it's not grown in Tunxi.
One more comment. Dryness bubbles up, surprises as it's so thirst quenching.
So this is a really perceptive comment. It's the dryness bubbles up. It almost acts like a thirst quencher. So you have a contradiction going on here, don't you? You have juicy. Well, juicy clearly is thirst quenching. Dryness is letting you know, oh, he didn't trick me. He didn't just pick grass from somewhere. This really has lots of catechins and flavonoids. And how do I know this? Because my tongue is dry. And it's really tea because my tongue is dry. And so you have both of those things going on at the same time, and you have a smoothness and a butteriness to this. So you've all captured what's really interesting about this tea. And I really like your approaches. Nothing has been off base. The only other thing that I haven't heard much about, and one thing that the Chinese would say about this is in that initial aroma, not the after aroma. So what do I mean by that? Initial aroma occurs with the very hot leaves just after you've separated tea liquor from the tea leaves. And that aroma has almost a piquantness to it, almost suggesting an orchid type of aroma. So that's one of the things that the Chinese would say about this. It doesn't when it cools down. When it cools down, it's closer to the dewy meadow, it's closer to the grassiness, but that initial aroma, when it first comes off the press, tells you, oh, little something else going on here with this.
On the aroma, we have another comment that says, first into the hot leaves suggested nuttiness to me.
Oh, and I like this too, because the nuttiness isn't all that far away from brininess. In other words, you're tasting something different than grassiness or hayness. You're tasting some bigger body in this. And this tea does have bigger body. And I like both nuttiness and brininess for two different reasons. The brininess suggests almost a more complex underpinning to this tea. The nuttiness is the result of that underpinning. So I like both the comments, right on the money with this. This is a great small varietal, and that's one. These are the reasons that we chose to bring this in. The other thing about this is, from the quality arena standpoint, it's really balanced. It's really steady. There isn't thinness to it. It looks like it should be thin, right? Very light, almost really transparent. But when you taste it, it's that butteriness which takes away from any hints of thinness. So you've really done a good job with this today. So let's talk again a little bit more about the polyphenols that are in this and why this ends up being so important with green tea. In the West, a lot of research has been done about green tea, and we've never talked carefully about amount of catechins, because catechins are the key element that they're studying in the West. Now, by the way, using a Western perspective, what has happened is, if you have one good catechin, then having 10 good catechins is 10 times better. And if we have 10 good catechins, why don't we eliminate everything else around the catechins so we can get them as strong as possible? You know, these bodybuilder catechins. And the main bodybuilder catechin is EGCG. Now, this is a long word, which means I'm going to say it out loud. Epigallocatechin gallate. That's actually two words. That's what EGCG is. And that's the one, as a percentage of the polyphenols, it's about 1/3 of the catechins in green tea. And that's the one scientists have focused a lot of attention. Now, within the last 3 or 4 years, Chinese scientists have come to this interesting conclusion, which is similar to what Western scientists have come to the conclusion about turmeric and curcumin. Curcumin, which is derived from turmeric, yeah, that's very good for pain in the joints, good as anti-inflammatory. It's very good. And the nutraceuticals have isolated it, concentrated it, and that goes out in pill form. And then when we wake up, oh, I'm sore today, we pop one of those and we feel better over time. But Western scientists doing more and more research on this have discovered it may actually be better to have the full complement of compounds and take that instead, because there's synergies. Catechins are no exceptions. They're finding more and more that somehow all these animal experiments seem to work better if they're using the full spectrum of what's in the tea leaf. So that's one of the directions that they're going with the current research with catechins, and that's very important. So when we've talked about catechins, and again, this being the chief component of green tea, did I say chief component of green tea? I did. That's not what I meant to say. This being in the West, the primary component that's researched, catechins in green tea compared to all the other styles of tea are more. So if you were going to rank the teas in catechins, you would rank them in the following way. You'd say green tea is first, white tea is second. Now the difference between white and green tea, there's not a huge difference, probably about a 12% difference, white tea being about 12% less. Then you have yellow teas, then you have oolong teas, you have red teas, and then you have the fermented teas. So in that order, and it's a decreasing order, right? In the fermented teas, almost no catechins. And it would be 80% or more less than what's in the green tea. So if your doctor or anybody said you should be drinking green teas because research indicates catechins are good for you, stick with the green teas. That's why you drink those. But does that mean that the other tea categories have no value or less value? And the answer to that is no, because as they do more and more research on that, they're discovering that the other compounds, which are derived, by the way, from the catechins, actually have more targeted values for people. So this equation is much more complicated than many people understand and than many publications really indicate. So that's important to realize when you're thinking about this. All right. Go ahead.
Around the energetics, getting that there's a subtle brightness to the energetics. It's not quite penetrating on the mind. Some of the other things.
Like this comment. So there's a subtle brightness to the energetics, and it doesn't, did you say it doesn't penetrate the mind?
Yes.
Yes, so the subtle is what's meant by not penetrating the mind. It's not, you don't detect it right away. And there is that?
That's all.
Oh, okay. So what else is coming from Anhui province, and why are we talking about other things from Anhui province? We need to talk about them to understand what a rich history and what a rich variety of teas come from this area. So from the green tea perspective, Premier's Choice comes from there. Wong's Creation comes from there. From the red tea, we've got Chima Needle and Vortex. and then Blindsided, which is a brand new tea this year. So we've got that area is well known, and we have a number of yellow teas that come from that area as well, or from that province. So that province is an important green tea or important tea producing province in China. And when you think of it, you should be thinking of, oh my God, it's likely to be pretty good if it comes from that province. The other thing that you should be thinking about is there's more craft that goes into the hand picking and the hand production of the teas in Chimen province, in Anhui province, than in some of the others. So when you think of the craft, you think of Anhui and you think of Fujian. Those two provinces are most crafty in their teas. When you think of Yunnan or you think of Guangxi province, it's not as much detail to that. It's more detail to the stock itself. And by stock, what I mean is you got old tree, you got ancient tree, you have material that's so rich and good, so long as you process it in a pretty standard form, you're going to come up with something good. Whereas in Anhui and Fujian, not only is it producing the tea, but they're doing all sorts of interesting experiments, not experiments, they've developed all sorts of interesting craft of doing that tea as well. So that's some of the things that you should take away from today as well. Are there any other questions or commentary about Tree of Life?
One more comment is that one of the commentators noticed that he forgot to eat before class, but this did not give him just an upset stomach.
So this is a really interesting comment. And the commentator notes that they forgot to eat. They were so excited and looking forward to this class that they forgot to eat, had the tea and realized, oh, wait a minute, I should be upset. I should be nauseated. And the answer is no. Some people get that way. Some teas, some green teas produce a strong reaction, and that's probably because their catechin content, one of the catechins which causes a little bit of nausea, is more pronounced. In other words, we tend to think of green tea as a uniform category, right? We think, okay, I might have green tea, but green tea, depending on where it's from, can have as much as a 30% difference in the chemical constituencies or constituents within the tea itself. In other words, you can have many more amino acids in some green teas, which really means a lot more L-theanine, and much less in others. And what determines that? There's several things. It's not only varietal, it's the terroir as well, and it also is where on the mountain it grows. So you have all of these elements which go into what makes up the green tea. And that's why some are milder and they're not going to upset your stomach in the same way that one that has different, it's a different varietal, different terroir, it'll have a more pronounced effect. All right, I want to switch gears unless there's any other comment, because I want to talk about what's going on in China weather-wise, which is important to all of us, because we're already starting to think about what we should be bringing back this year. So a piece of good news amidst all the cruddy news in the world is that there was a snow in several of the green tea areas, and it was light enough that it killed the pests, but not so light and not so heavy that it's damaged the plants. So the farmers actually are beginning to have a good feeling about what this year is going to look like. And that's really good news as we think about what we're going to get for this next year. The other thing that I need to give you a heads up on is we're looking to potentially travel maybe to Asia, not to China, but possibly to Japan. And if that happens, that'll be within about a month. So we'll still put advertisements for tea tastings up, but we may change the dates a little bit. And so you should be aware that that's part of what we're thinking. If we do end up going to Japan, we're going to look at tea fields there, and we're being introduced by the Chinese Tea Association to farmers within Japan. All of this, of course, relates to whether it's safe to go, safe from the Omicron situation, safe from any situation related to flying in general, but we're anxious to do something like that. If we don't go there, we have several other places we're thinking of going, but we'll keep you up to date as we move forward in our decision about that. All right. Today, for a change, I didn't overtalk. And so that means that we're going to end a little early, I think, unless you have any other questions or commentary. And you guys were great with this tea. Whether you liked it or not, you got the elements of it. And that's the key thing, because everybody's tastes are a little different. And what you end up liking doesn't mean that it's not, or what you don't care for doesn't mean it doesn't have the best quality. It just means that it doesn't agree with your taste buds. And that's perfectly okay. So thank you for all the commentary this week. This was
One more comment just popped up.
Okay.
Right before you're going to wrap up. The commentator says that sourcing in Japan feels like a big change and is wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about it.
Oh, so going to Japan, this is a really great question. The commentator notes that doing anything in terms of Japanese teas would be a big change from what we've been doing so far, because we focused on Chinese teas exclusively. It's our intention to continue to expand our Chinese tea collection, but there's several things that we should think about. The first is we don't know geopolitically what the world's going to look like in these upcoming years. We hope that there's no interference with our ability to continue to bring wonderful tea experiences from China. And we're stocking up from a strategic point of view to try and establish a backup situation in terms of time, not in terms of time, but in terms of supply. That's the first thing that's on our mind. The second thing is, from the start, before we opened this shop, we had always intended to look at Japanese teas, but when Fukushima occurred, we realized, can't do that, not now. Now we're coming back and exploring whether we can look at Japanese teas or not. We don't know, and we have to go there. We have to establish relationships. So just in case you're worried, we're not going to bring Japanese tea right back with us. We're going to go through the same model that we always go through. We'll work on the relationship first. We'll get to know the farmers. We'll understand whether they're doing or practicing sustainable habits of farming. We also need to know whether they are reliable in terms of suppliers. So we're dipping our toe in the water with this. We don't have a plan right this minute to bring back. But if we're going to bring back in years to come, we've got to establish some relationships so that we can bring back the best stuff. Because as you know, we're not going to bring back schlock for you. we bring back stuff, it better be the best stuff. So yes, it does somehow represent a deviation, but not as large a deviation as you might think. The other aspect, of course, to that, again, is the China aspect, because if all of a sudden we're cut off from supply, then we can't just stop being a tea shop for you. We have to see if there are other places that we can get really good tea. So,
And the final question, back to popular demand. Why do they Tree of Life?
why do they, why the Tree of Life? Okay. So when this is a question about the naming. Why did we name this Tree of Life? This tea was so good from our perspective. We thought, this is like, it was the combination of not only the goodness of the tea, but I just went through Anhui province and where you get all these wonderful teas from. It's like a praise of the fact that this is another great tea from Montclair province. So Tree of Life. That's it. Great. Next week, we're going to do a red tea called Red Crown. Hope all of you are safe. Stay safe this week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. One more thing. By the way, I thank all of those of you who have responded to the website requests, sent reviews, have purchased the fundamentals class. And by the way, we'll start sending out the fundamentals class material on Monday. So for those of you who've ordered and wondered whether that went into a black hole, no, it didn't go into a black hole. We just thought we could store the tea here better than you might be able to store it. We'll start to send it out on Monday. So stay safe. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.